Hi, everyone. It's Vince Molinaro, and welcome to this episode of the Lead the Future podcast. I'm excited to have Gina Bianchini with us today. She is the author of the new book, Purpose, Design a Community and Change Your Life. It is a Wall Street Journal bestseller. So congrats, Gina. She's also the CEO and founder of Mighty, where creators and entrepreneurs and brands build digital communities and courses with cultural software. We are also a customer and love the platform. In 2019, she also launched Community Design Masterclass with over 8,000 people around the world who have learned how to build a community so valuable that one can charge for it, and yet so well designed it runs itself. Before Mighty, Gina was the CEO and co-founder of Ning, a pioneering global platform for creating social networks. And she started that company with Mark Andreessen in 2004. And Gina has been featured in Fast Company, Wired, Vanity Fair, Fortune, Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and the New York Times. She's appeared on CNBC, CNN, and The Charlie Rose Show. She grew up in Cupertino, California, graduated with honors from Stanford University, and started her career in the high technology group at Goldman Sachs and Company, and received her MBA from Stanford Business School. Welcome again, Gina, to the Lead the Future podcast. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
This is so great. Like every time I get the opportunity to talk to you, I'm like, jump at it.
That's very nice of you. So let's, not only are you running a very successful company, but you also found the time, to write your book. And what kind of motivated you to do that? I'm really curious.
I'm glad you asked. So it was not the kind of thing that I recommend taking on if you are also running a high growth company. But I'll tell you what was so important to me, and the itch that I wanted to scratch with it, which is I am regularly seeing people walking through life without clarity of their purpose, which I define as the clear and positive intention for your time, your talents, your energy, and your focus for our brief time on planet Earth. And what I found in teaching this community design masterclass is that when people could start with and really discovered their purpose, everything changed.
Right.
It wasn't just about the community that they could create. It was also about the confidence that they had in terms of their ability to shape the future, their confidence and ability to have clarity in terms of where are they spending their time, as opposed to, what so many of us do, which is, oh, we should do something. Or if I don't do this thing, someone's going to be mad at me, or I have to take this kind of job, or I'm going to get status or credibility if I post to social media all the time. So all of these sort of built-in assumptions, and the only way that we can find our path is if we take the time with the right context and the right questions and the right goals to really decide what is our clear and positive intention for our time, our talents, our energy, and our focus. So we can answer these questions of like, why am I doing this? What am I doing here? What is this all for? And again, I'm not a rabbi. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a doctor. I'm not any of the things. But what I am is a curious human being who really wants to lift other people up and see them succeed, and have had a front row seat to watch how ideas turn into platforms that turn into culture, that turn into really our day-to-day living and breathing world. And because I've seen that through multiple tech iterations and waves, I am very confident in how each of us has the full power to realize our fullest potential, to have an impact on those around us, and if I can just help one person, I think I've succeeded in this so far, but I really sat down with the book and I was like, if I can help one person build a set of practices that are super easy to do, really comfortable, and also just kind of make sense,
Yeah.
I will have done something that matters to me and was therefore worth the time and, the late nights and early mornings and weekends of putting, putting these ideas down in a book.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're going to get into those practices in a bit because,
What I was
you know,
referring to.
the book is, great job on getting the book done. And number two, also making it so practical and also very inspiring because a big part of it is your own story, which I do want to get into as
Sure.
well. Before we go there, just kind of if in case someone's watching this and doesn't really know about Mighty and the great work that you and your team do, why don't we talk a little bit about what really is ultimately, I think, your personal purpose manifested through Mighty?
Yeah. So we are a platform for people to be able to create culture, meaning being able to bring together content and courses and commerce and community, which is how you articulate ideas. That's content. Build not just a following, but a community of people who are building relationships and really absorbing those ideas, turning them into practices, turning them into habits, and ultimately operating in a community where ideas become real in people's lives. So how do we do that practically? Because there's always, whenever I say that, somebody's like, okay, Gina, that's all great, but what the heck does the thing do? So it is a platform for being able to build communities through chat and activity feeds, through courses. So online courses with course communities, with members, with events, memberships. So you can actually have a paid community on a Mighty Network, or all of the above. So we have some of the just brands you've heard of, from TED to Mind Body to, Tony Robbins and Jay Shetty and Sherry Salata and Yoga with Adrian and others, all, and obviously you, Vince, running their communities and courses in such a way that people can show up as beginners and really go on a value journey all the way through to masterminds and certifications and other programs that, up until Mighty, you couldn't do all of these things in one place. It's certainly not all in one place under your brand and instantly available on every platform, including if you want to roll out your programs, roll out your organizations, roll out your community, roll out your courses on your own mobile apps as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're having a blast with it. And certainly we use
it. It's fun, right?
Yeah. We use it primarily in our work with organizations and developing their leaders. And it's just amazing. And it's simple. It gives us so much more flexibility and drives all the things that organizations are looking for in terms of, flexibility in learning, sustainment, building community. It's all there, and we've been very happy with you and your team, and obviously so have our own customers. So thank you for that.
That's so nice to hear.
Yeah. So what I found really interesting in the book is you talk about your story, and you grew up in Cupertino at a time when a lot was happening and a lot of really notable human beings were in that area. And tell us a little bit about those early days and what you saw and how it kind of influenced your thinking, as a technology leader.
Yeah. So I grew up in Cupertino, as you said, in the basically the mid to late 70s and 80s. And so I actually was there when Cupertino was all orchards. That's like why my grandparents moved to Cupertino in the first place, all the way through to those same orchards becoming office parks that today are, Apple's spaceship headquarters. And so in watching it, I've had sort of this front row seat in understanding what were those dynamics of that culture of Cupertino and why that moment, why they're, who and where and what and how. And what I would observe is that it was a scene, meaning that people manifested their interests, their passions, their goals, their curiosity by coming together in a community with other people and really exploring that. So whether that was the Homebrew Computer Club, which was really where Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak met, and they were essentially taking apart and putting back together personal computers before they were like ever a thing. Or in my own family, my father restored classic cars as a history teacher. So he had to sort of do it all through parts, but we had the Model A club that we would like put on vests and like ride around in a rumble seat. Or my mom actually raised guinea pigs and showed them. So I actually spent a lot of my youth going to guinea pig shows at various county fairgrounds. And so what I saw and believe is the core to any innovation, but also any true purpose, is the power of community to explore ideas, the power of community to try new things, the power of community to also be there when tragedy strikes.
Yeah.
And that certainly was my experience as well when my father died when I was 11. That same community of tinkerers and classic car people and children's theater friends, they rallied around us in a way that was really special. And I think always, even though I went off and did various things, when I found myself sitting at the intersection of social technologies back in 2004 to even earlier than that, but it all made sense to me because of where I was, what I understood, and what I believe needs to exist in the world, which is this ability for communities to come together and be a part of something bigger than themselves on a path to results and transformation that whether you look at it from the lens of religion or from sociology or anthropology or neurobiology or academic research, it's pretty clear. We are not going to achieve results and transformation in our lives on our own as individuals. And it's a myth that I think is a really dangerous one.
Yeah. What was really helpful, as we started, working with your organization, and so, my work on community of leaders aligns so much with a lot of your thinking, because, when we were doing that work kind of in the early days of the pandemic and starting to see and really appreciating that bringing people together at a critical time, even if it was, virtually, was critical. And given the challenges that, we're all facing, I just, like you, believe, community is the antidote to a lot of the social challenges we face, right? The isolation, the stress that people are finding. And I think that's, from my sense, a big part of the success of your company and the work you're doing is you're just enabling people to form communities. And I've met some of your other customers doing amazing things there's all sorts of communities out there that bring people, like-minded people together to do work they couldn't do on their own. And what I thought was, one time in one of the masterclass sessions we were in, you had said something which was, very, maybe, I'm not sure it was an offhanded comment, but it was very profound, right? It's sort of thinking about, who needs you the most right now. And I think that's also a provocative question to help people kind of get at their sense of purpose. And when you had said that, and then I read the book later to hear that line, read that line where you said, we're ultimately all born into community. I thought that jumped out at me as well. And I'd love to kind of get your perspective just on that, because that to me was a very meaningful part of your book.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, here's the thing about community. We are built for community. And this moment, I actually had a friend of mine, I was out to dinner with her maybe a few months ago now. And we were talking about just the contrast between how so many of us are spending literally an average of 7 hours a day on social media. And then in contrast to that, what you do in a community, and they're very different things. I'm happy to talk about what is different. And she actually said something really profound to me, which was, the services are designed to keep us as individuals and to see ourselves as individuals. It's designed to be that way. And I think she's right. And so, the starting place for my work and what we do at Mighty is really about, we are made for community. And when you start from, the place of building a community or designing a community, so some of the objections we hear are things like, oh, community building is so hard. There's the whole set of people out there that are like, community is so hard. You need to hire me to build a community because you can't possibly do it yourself, which I just think is false. People are made for community. So when you start to think about it from the perspective of like, oh gosh, it's so much work, or I don't want to put myself out there, because it feels like in so much of what we do, we even talk about how profoundly perverse the whole idea of personal branding is, that you are a brand as a human being. And rather than personal branding and thinking about it as like, oh, well, if I start a community, I'm putting myself out there and I'm going to be judged, or I'm going to put myself out there and everyone's going to join my community for me. I want to flip all of that 180 degrees and offer something very different, which is, number one, there's a set of people who need your community the most right now, and they are waiting for you to build it, not because of you, not because of your personal brand, not because of what you would represent to them, but rather because they are hungry for connection, community, belonging, in pursuit of results and transformation that they simply cannot get on their own. So when you make that shift to, my job is not to put myself out there and sell or spam or, oh my gosh, I'm going to send people too many emails, but rather I am creating a community that I want to bring people together around this specific purpose with these specific goals. And my goal, my purpose, my intention is to talk to enough people such that those folks that are out there waiting, I don't have to convince anybody. Yeah. When I'm clear in my own purpose and I'm clear in the community's purpose, I will attract the people who need this community the most right now, because we are made for community. We might be a little rusty. We might not be great at it,
right? But
that's easily fixable. Yeah. So I don't know if I said that as clearly as I feel it, which is, it's not about you. It is about the people that you are bringing together and the role that you can play in their lives to make the connections that bring them a sense of freedom and belonging and connection and energy. I hosted a dinner for some friends who didn't know each other a few weeks ago. And my only goal was to bring these amazing people together over dinner. And I don't do that a lot, but I just was like, you guys should all know each other.
Right.
To a person, they left not just because the conversation was really interesting and great, but when you sit down and you meet people that are interesting, it triggers the abundance mindset. You remember that there are billions of people in the world, and all you need are a couple hundred or even a couple to make your life infinitely richer and more interesting and more energizing and all of the things. So it's just something that any of us can do, even if we're a little rusty, and even if, we're spending time trying to figure out what our next thought leadership post is going to be. That's just, it's not a productive way of showing up in the world when there's so many people that are lonely and hungry for
Right.
how do you bring a set of people together towards a bigger mission, towards something bigger than themselves.
Yeah, and as you're chatting, I'm just reflecting in many ways, we do that within organizations with leaders because, like, as you say, that isolation, that sense of being disconnected, it exists among colleagues and coworkers in a way, and that sense of community is the biggest missed opportunity in most organizations, and so
Yep.
that's kind of what drives our purpose. And obviously facilitated through our work with you. So let's go a little deeper and let's start getting into the ideas. And so you kind of really outline a very practical set of practices, for your reader to kind of work through, which I found really, really valuable. So walk us through in terms of, because, outlining, you do a compelling job of outlining, obviously, the power of purpose, but it can be daunting for someone to be thinking about that. And yet you are able to kind of think about it as a set of practices. So walk us through if I've got a bit of time with Gina, how does she help, little me figure out my purpose?
I appreciate it's not, you're not just a little old you, but I love that point, and I love what you are asking. So fundamentally, what is so powerful is if each of us can have what I like to call your future story. So this is the really thoughtful and intentional picture of the world that you want to live in. And as you think about that world that you want to live in, there is a really easy way to build your purpose into a practice. And I call it the Purpose 30. So this is 30 minutes, 30 days, 6 questions. 30 minutes, 30 days, 6 questions. And the 6 questions you can take and look at one of them, you look at all of them. There's all sorts of different ways that you can do this practice. The most important thing is that it is pen to paper. It is not on your device. It is not on your notes app, because the reality is when it's on your notes app, you are doing 4 other things. And the whole point is being able to sit down with your favorite beverage, either in the morning or the evening, whenever you have the most energy and can carve out time away from your friends, your family, your work. And here are the 6 questions. What are 3 things you're able to do in the future, looking out 5 or 10 years, that you're not able to do today? So what are 3 things you're able to do in the future that you're not able to do today? What are 3 things that you've accomplished? 3 things you've accomplished. What are 3 things that you have taken a stand for? Now, those don't have to be political. Those can be things that are about your values, your principles, the kind of world that you want to live in. Last 3 questions. What has changed in your world or the world at large for the better in the most unexpected or surprising way? So what's changed in your world or the world at large for the better in the most unexpected and surprising way? Who are the people that you've brought together? And what are 3 things they're able to do in the future that they're not able to do today? When
Internalizing these questions.
when we get
Awesome.
clear on our individual purpose, we realize very quickly, or at least in my experience, I've realized very quickly, and I've seen this happen for other people as well, that very quickly it becomes, okay, how do I show up for others?
Right.
What is my legacy? What is the impact I want to have on the world? And when you give yourself the time to be able to answer these questions and have something written down, you can translate it into your future story. And a future story is so powerful. And there's tons of research on this from a lot of different angles, but your future story gives you agency.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you the ability to visualize a future that isn't the future that you're reading about on the news, that people around you may be catastrophizing, but rather you can get very clear on what you want, but more importantly, how you're going to show up and the impact that you're going to have on others. Because in a networked world, we can have much bigger impact than at any point in time. And it's not from building a big audience or, having 14,000 carousels on LinkedIn. It is from building a community where you learn the skills and can facilitate people building relationships with each other. Yeah. I think anyone who has ever, I've been testing this out. So Vince, maybe you can react to this. One of the hardest things about community and community building, whether it's in real life or online, is there is a magic to it. There is an energy to it. Mm-hmm. There is an abundance to it that is very hard to put words against. Yeah. And so what happens is that, I meet so many people that are like, oh my gosh, this is just the best. And then I ask the question, I'm like, great, what's the best about it? And they're like, it's just awesome. And I think the reason I've kind of racked my head racked my brain, racked my head. It sounds like I just hit a wall or something. I've racked my brain for why that is. Why is it hard to articulate the power and the energy and the creativity and just the dynamic goodness of community, especially communities that are built around something bigger than ourselves. Mm-hmm. And it's really, I believe, comes down to the fact that we are built for community. It's this moment of getting back to things that either we feel like we've lost if we're a little older, or for a entire younger generation may never have felt the power and the belonging and the energy and the infectious energy that comes from a community that has been brought together for a bigger purpose, for a moment in time or over the long term to have identity that's associated with something that we want to do in the world and the impact that we want to have on others.
Yeah, it's so great. And as you're describing that in such a compelling way, there's two thoughts that come to mind in our own experience as we try to do this within organizations. And one is, you have that sense of community. And this is what we hear from the leaders we work with, when they have a sense that my colleagues have my back, right? And the second you're part of a community where everyone has each other's backs, like everyone just kind of relaxes a little.
Yeah.
The other dynamic we've seen when we're trying to kind of nudge a group into becoming a community, it usually starts with one person who kind of, says, I got a problem. Is it okay if I ask a question to get some perspectives? And we've witnessed this so many times. The second someone has the courage to do that, and then they all come around that person and help them with giving them ideas and brainstorming options and whatnot. And then someone else comes, well, if we got some time, I'm struggling with this. Yeah. And that is sort of where I've seen that magic that you described play out. I don't know if this resonates with your own experience.
Absolutely. Well, and it's one of the reasons why, organizations that have really helped people with leadership and change. And you know this, which is you start with confidentiality. So
Right.
you can actually create this very quickly if people believe that this is confidentiality, confidential. I don't know why I just needed to say confidentiality in that way. Nothing, never, no one. And when you start, it's first of all, it's so different because think about how everybody, again, if you are trying to mine your life and mine your interactions for content, it's a very different way of approaching the world as opposed to saying, I'm going to be present and this is about connection and this is about how are we showing up for each other. And so you can create those conditions very quickly when you make agreements around confidentiality, when you make agreements that we're not here to impress each other with how many things we've done or credentials we have. One of my favorites too is in this new world of personal branding, how everyone talks about authenticity, but they talk about it in a very like arm's length way. Like we're going to be very vulnerable right now, as opposed to just being vulnerable and sharing a story where something's not going well or we're struggling with it. The other thing that I've observed, and I don't know if this is true for you in your work as well, is advice will shut down conversations and stories expand them. So when you are in one of these moments where you are either creating the context for people making connections with each other, not only is confidentiality so powerful, but also we don't give advice. We're making the agreement that this is not advice. This is about how are we able to share our stories, experiences, and our ideas. And what I have found is that expands the conversation. Whereas the problem with advice is that, well, okay, am I taking your advice? Am I not taking your advice? And if I don't take your advice, now we've got a problem.
Yeah.
Versus, hey, Vince, I went through something really similar recently. I don't know if it's exactly like what you're struggling with, but I'll share what I did, which was, went and talked to 5 of my friends and vented about this person. And then I like figured out like a way of navigating it. And what I learned for myself was X, Y, or Z. And I share that, with love and with support. And you can just take that for
Yeah.
I always like to add what you paid for it, which is typically nothing. So
So is that kind of when you write about kind of creating culture at scale, is that kind of the essence of it? Is it that kind of that openness, that that confidentiality is being critical, that ability to kind of share our stories with one another? What else have you learned about
yeah.
culture at scale? Because that's another, I found that to be another critical part of your book that you provide amazing insights in.
Yeah. So here's how I'd answer that. I actually think you could build any kind of culture at scale.
Hmm.
The most important thing though, in this moment, as we sit here at the early days of, 2023, we have lost a set of shared social norms. So one of the most important thing for hosts of communities and my, my work is I want to invite each and every one of you to become a host of a community, even if that's just meaning having some people over for dinner. And so actually the most important thing in this moment is to be explicit with what is the culture you're building.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are explicit, and this is the thing that I write about that I think is really problematic, is that we've now gotten into this sort of crutch, and it's become somewhat conventional to start like a community, or when somebody first joins a community, to tell them all the things that they shouldn't do in the community, like don't be mean to anybody, no hate, no this, no that. It's like first of all, what is that telling somebody when they're joining? It's like, don't be a murderer. Don't like, we should know, better. But if we don't, let's actually spend 99% of the time, not on all the things you shouldn't do, but all the things that we do here. So for example, one of the things we do here is we share our stories. So if somebody shows up and shares a story, we want to validate that, but this isn't a place for advice. Share your story, share your observations, share things that expand the conversation. Another thing would be, feel free. We all make an agreement that if somebody reaches out to you in this community, you respond. Mm-hmm. And if you can't respond, maybe this is not the right community for you. But nothing feels worse than if you are like, am I going to be the weirdo that's like messaging someone? And so just that simple agreement that we're all making up front, like these are the things we do in this community. Another one is on Tuesdays, we have 9 a.m. live streams. You are welcome to join our live streams. They're really fun. They're awesome. Do you see the difference between showing up and saying, don't murder anybody?
Right.
And just these things that are actually like, we should have an expectation that someone is going to show up in a positive light.
Yeah.
And that then together we are going to build, we're going to let you know what the cultural norms are. And then we're going to build on them together.
Which is how I think most people are wired anyways.
Uh-huh.
Right?
They're looking around for like, what are we doing here? Do I ask questions? Do I not ask questions? And they'll take it. And that's also why having some members that are modeling what is it that we do here? Or I like to think about it as the welcome wagon, the people that are like, hey, Vince, I'm so glad you joined. Here's a little bit of the lay of the land. And not just here are the features, but here's the way that we operate. Here are our norms. Yeah. And you probably want to show up on Tuesdays because they're super fun live streams now with multi-speaker. Or you know what? The best thing about this community is the questions that are being asked every day. Join in, share your story. It's the best way to meet other members. And one of the agreements that we all have made is that if anybody direct messages another member, we'll get back, even if it's like, oh, I'm not the right person for this, but we will not ignore you and we will not ghost you.
Yeah. Well, it's what a host does, right? It's what a host does. Cool. Yeah. So thank you for sharing those insights. I want to start bringing the conversation to a close and again, recommend your book to anyone who really is feeling like it's time for me to start really thinking in a pretty serious way about my purpose and the kind of impact I want to have in this world and in the lives of others. So it's a great book for walking people through how to do it. It's not going to be easy. Those 6 questions you provided are really challenging.
Yeah.
But meaningful.
But that's also, right? And you can, and that's why I say like, take one.
Yeah.
Meditate. Maybe you are going to meditate on it and reflect on it for a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great.
So what I also would love to kind of, you're a champion of these ideas, but you also are an entrepreneur and a very successful, business leader, and you're driving, a company experiencing high growth. And I'd love to get kind of your take on what's that formula? What have you learned about leading through high growth? Because that's it's exciting, but it can also be a challenge for some. And anything you can share, I know would be of value to the community that we work with. Sure.
It really depends on the day, which is also what makes it so much fun. The thing that if I'm reflecting, I would say the hardest thing about being in a growth mode is focus. It's focus, because it's too easy. And this is true whether you're in high growth or any kind of business. But if you are literally like, I have no growth and I need to like manage my expenses, your focus is pretty clear.
Yeah.
When you are in high growth and you are, on a path to profitability, you are looking at ways to make sure that you can continue to add value. and really offer something meaningful to your customers, there's a lot of different ways to do it. And one of the most challenging aspects of it with my own team is just, how do you balance conversations about the future and trade-offs and different things without confusing it with, oh, do you mean drop everything right now, turn on a dime, and like go and do something totally different than the thing that we're doing? And what's been interesting is that finding a common language amongst my team for, we are moving forward, stay focused, but we also need to make sure that conversations are happening about the future and different things, because we operate in a dynamic market, you know, and it's never been as clear as today that things can change overnight. New technologies can show up, and you've got to be able to process them. You have to be able to say, okay, well, what is this? And we really operate with the OODA loop, you know, the observe, orient, decide, and act, and then make sure you observe again. But even with all of these great frameworks and these great tools, operating in an organic system with people that like believe in the mission, one of the most challenging things is to say, no, I'm really serious. Like, we're not going to change the sort of the main thing is the main thing. And we also need to be able to react and have conversations and figure these things out. And so I think that balance between execution and strategy, or, you know, what's right in front of us that we're working on and need to get out the door, you know, in the next week, versus, okay, what are we going to do in a month or 6 months? You know, those things remain challenging because there are so many different directions that you can take. So, and I think anybody that's like, if you ignore kind of new inputs, if you react too fast to the last input, that's problematic. Right. And if you ignore the inputs because you just have tunnel vision, that's also problematic. So it's living in this fuzzy place where you're sort of constantly making trade-offs and constantly doing thought exercises around like validating the trade-offs that you've made, that I think is, as I've said to my team multiple times, it's why we get paid the big bucks.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Really insightful and very valuable. Well, thanks, Gina. I really appreciate you joining us again. As always, you just always great conversations and tremendous insights. Wish you and your team continued success. And as well, I know your book's already wildly successful, but encourage even more success with it. Thank you for writing it. And thanks for being a guest on our podcast.
I appreciate it. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.